Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's workshop. Today, we will dive into a very exciting topic, taking the mystery out of generative AI and prompt creation. Let's meet today's speakers. Today's discussion will be led by Graham Glass, the CEO of CYPHER LEARNING. Graham is an edtech visionary pioneering the use of AI-powered modern learning platforms and personalized, elevated training and learning experiences. Graham leads the discussion in the public square about balancing transformative AI powers with human priorities and control. He shares his expertise via major media outlets and in thought leadership forums worldwide. Graham founded multiple edtech firms and wrote multiple books, all with the mission of advancing modern learning. Moderating today's workshop will be Michael Rochelle. He is the Chief Strategy Officer and Principal Analyst at Brandon Hall Group. Michael serves in a variety of roles, including overseeing research and advisory support for organizations and solution providers. Michael is one of the company's principal analysts, covering learning and development, talent management, and other areas. His prior experience includes many executive leadership roles, including human resources, information technologies, sales, and business development. Thank you to today's workshop sponsor, CYPHER LEARNING. CYPHER LEARNING is leading the necessary disruption of learning platforms to unleash human potential with modern learning. The company exists to ignite lifelong passions through personalized, engaging, and limitless learning experiences for all. CYPHER gives learning and development professionals and educators more time to teach and train, builds human connection into everything they do, and delivers tailored learning experiences that are meaningful and measurable. The CYPHER platform is easy to use, beautifully designed, and infused with AI-powered technology. Every aspect beams thoughtful innovation and engineering that puts people first. Millions of users experience their just-in-time, just for me, just the way I want it approach in 50+ languages with CYPHER award-winning program. See the modern learning platform at www.cypherlearning.com. For those of you who aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we are a human capital management research and advisory firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world throughout research and tools. We have 6 practice areas, including learning and development, talent management, and leadership development. A quick mention that we currently have several certification programs open for enrollment, including our Certified Learning Strategist program. Visit certification.brandonhall.com to learn more about how to earn that designation. Your participation in Brandon Hall Group's research surveys is one of the most crucial components of our insights and thought leadership. So if you have a few minutes to spare and see any topics that you can take a survey for, it is greatly appreciated. As you can see, we have 2 open surveys right now. How do you feel about buying HCM technology? And what do HCM technology buyers think of you? Links will be available in your handout, or you can always visit brandonhall.com. All participants receive a piece of complimentary research once the results are analyzed. Now, a few logistics. To ask questions, please use the questions panel on your control bar. We will leave time at the end for questions. The workshop is being recorded, and we will share a link to the recording and a PDF of the presentation via email in roughly 24 hours. The chat is also open for today, and we really hope that you will share your thoughts and experiences as we go along in the workshop today. Your feedback and perspective on what we present today and on your own experiences will make the workshop more valuable for everyone. So please join in on today's discussion and share your thoughts as we go through, or just simply pop in, say hello, and let us know where you're joining from today. And finally, we are excited to share that at the end of today's workshop, we will be selecting our raffle winner. Stay tuned to see if you are the lucky winner. You must be present to win. Okay, now let's get to the content. Michael Rochelle will get us started.
Thanks everyone for joining. Michael Rochelle, Graham, great to have you. We're pretty excited about this. It's a really special occasion and a special event to get someone like Graham to go through a workshop like this. I've had many opportunities to meet with Graham, and his knowledge and understanding of this is extremely unique. And I would venture to say that you'll never think the same way about this after you get done with this call. So remarkable. And I want you to take advantage of his expertise and experience. I was putting in the chat, ask away on questions. That's what we're here to do. We'll jump in, get those answered for you, but get ready for a really exciting opportunity to learn the power of this incredible tool that we have in front of us. So what we have here is what we promised we would cover. And just wanted to give everyone a chance to understand that Graham's going to be taking us through a very thoughtful approach on understanding Gen AI's significance in L&D. We're also going to be taking a look at what its potential is for getting that highly personalized learning experience that we all need for our learners. We're going to talk about DALL-E and GPT-4 functionality for creating that kind of learning that gets the attention of our learners. We're also going to be taking a look at the various forms of generative AI and kind of their role in how we create this. We know that there's a lot of them out there. Everyone's trying to understand how these all work. The other is, and we get this asked a lot, is how do you know what to ask Gen AI? So Graham's going to take us through the importance of prompts and talk about how they are able to extract the best value from your Gen AI session. And then we're going to talk about what we believe are the craft educational prompts. These are very cool best practices that Graham will be sharing about how to construct these, how to get them to be sound in terms of its learning theory, and how do we get the most relevant content. And then we're also going to talk about, and maybe some of you aren't familiar with the term, but you'll definitely know what it means after Graham gets done speaking, which is the difference between packaged versus unpackaged AI. And then one that's top of everyone's mind is, how do we traverse the waters of privacy, copyright, and other things when using AI? So let's get to it. We're going to do a little bit of an icebreaker. I'll launch a poll really quick to everyone. Simple question, simple answer. How familiar are you with using Gen AI to create learning content? So I'll give you a minute, and then we'll share the answer. So Graham, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you had to guess, where do you think the majority of people are going to fall?
I would say somewhat familiar. It's not going to be not familiar. Somewhat or familiar. That's my guess.
Yeah, I'm thinking the majority will be somewhat familiar as well. I think with everything that's happening and how fast it's happening, I think that's where most people will follow.
Yeah. And while we're waiting for the poll results, I'll mention that I had a 1-hour chat with ChatGPT last night discussing the state of Gen AI and education.
Interesting.
And so I use ChatGPT extensively. So what I do as CTO and CEO is that I have a long discussion, and then I share the discussion with the rest of my team. So when they come into work the next day, they can see, here's how, Graham has been using it. There we go. Somewhat familiar.
Graham, you and I are geniuses. So there we are, right? Somewhat familiar.
Yeah, somewhat familiar.
It's where I think all of a sudden, this is like a perfect bell curve, right?
Yeah, and it's a great audience because, you know some of it, but you want to dig in and deep more. So it's a good match.
All right, so let's kick it off. Let's get into our first discussion point.
Okay, super. So I presume someone's going to go to the next slide for me. There we go. So hi everybody. My name is Graham Glass. As Michael said in his very nice intro, I'm the CEO of CYPHER LEARNING. And what I want to do today is really tackle 3 things. First of all is, what is generative AI and how does it work? Second topic is, what can it do for you today? And third thing is, what is it going to do for you in the future? And so I think I think by the end of this, you'll have a pretty good idea of all three of those. So before I start talking about the history of Gen AI, I want to talk a little bit about my own history so you kind of know where I'm coming from. So I grew up in the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent. And ever since I was a kid, I loved AI. So I used to watch Star Trek and the ship's computer, and I thought that was so cool. I used to watch this series called Blake's 7, and they had this massive ship's computer called Zen, which always was extremely smart and wise and talked in a big booming voice, as the AI should. And it always captured my imagination, some kind of thinking machine that can help you do stuff. And notice that in Star Trek and Blake 7, they didn't replace the humans. They were always like the really, really useful sidekicks, which is pretty much how I still think about AI. So I became a computer science guy. I did my undergraduate degree at University of Southampton, and then I moved to Dallas, Texas to do my graduate work. And while I was there working on computer science master's degree and PhD, I got invited to teach at the University of Texas at Dallas. And I've got no idea why, because I had no teaching background, no teaching credentials, zero. But they said, hey, Graham, you seem quite good at this stuff. Would you like to teach it? So I just thought, hey, why not? I think I might enjoy it. And the first time I taught computer science to undergraduates, I was so incredibly buzzed, I couldn't get to sleep that night. I just thought, what an incredible experience, surrounded by these young, enthusiastic people who want to pick my brain dry. And I was getting very creative, like, what's the best way to teach all these people? And I ended up doing a lot of project-based stuff. And funnily enough, one of the first projects that I taught was building a neural network simulator. So somehow around that time, people started to talk about AI, very primitive. Just originally, it was like a few like neurons, if you like, digital neurons emulating a brain. But in those days, computers were really slow. People really didn't know what they were doing. But they would create a few interesting experiments where these neurons could recognize simple patterns without being pre-programmed. So that was the very first glimmer that something might be going on there. And I was one of the founding members of the Dallas MIND, which is short for the Metroplex Institute for Neural Dynamics. How's that for a contorted an acronym? But so I was very interested in this stuff as a hobby. But I continued down the pathway of teaching and learning computer science. And then I formed a company to teach all that stuff to businesses all over America. So if you happen to live in Dallas, you'll know about Texas Instruments and IBM there. In Canada, it was Northern Telecom. So I started building up quite a good repertoire, if you like, of educational knowledge, teaching a higher ed and then teaching in corporations. But I never really thought of education as my career. I always thought of computer science as my career. Now, as this was going on, there was more and more talk about neural networks, and people started scaling them up. And instead of 10 neurons, it would be 100 neurons and then 1,000 neurons. And you could tell that there was still something interesting happening, but it wasn't practical. It was slow and it didn't really do very much. And honestly, a lot of people who have been following this kind of got bored of the lack of progress and moved on to other things, like genetic algorithms, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today. So I kept on doing computer science, and I founded a couple of companies that were pure tech companies, distributed computing, web services, SOAP, if you remember these kind of technologies. But I was always drawn back to education. So I started CYPHER Learning with a goal of combining the best in technology with the best of education practices. So this is kind of where I am right now. So I'm going to start now. You know a little bit about my background. I'll tell you a little bit about how generative AI works. So what happened was all of these little projects that had been going on with neural networks reached a certain point in scale where they had like 10,000 or 100,000 neurons. And people started noticing some interesting stuff, like they actually started getting better. And they would start recognizing sentences and would be able to create sentences on their own. But still, it didn't really reach a tipping point And then some scientists, one of which who is still at OpenAI, had this deep intuitive feeling like if we could scale this to billions of neurons, then we think it was going to get a lot better. And everyone thought, why would just adding more neurons make this stuff better? But in fact, it does. And it was that combined with something called transformers, which is a way to focus the attention of the network on the things that are most relevant, that resulted in the breakthrough that we now know to be ChatGPT version 3. So I know it seems like a decade ago, but it was literally about a year ago where people started saying, hey, have you heard about this thing called ChatGPT? It's like, no. And so I remember sitting down at this thing, and I think the first question I asked it was, what was 2 plus 2? That was how low my bar was. And it says 4. It's like, okay, well, that's good. And then I started asking some really simple questions. What's the capital of London? More like search engine kind of stuff. And it got those things pretty right. But the thing that really did it for me was that I said to it, teach me algebra. So I didn't just ask it a simple, lookup question. I want it to teach me. And it said, great, let's get going. What's the answer to this? And it was using the Socratic method to engage me in discussion. So it was a conversational approach. And I'd never, ever seen that before. And when I started using this, it's like, wow, this is amazing. Now, behind the scenes, what's going on? Because a lot of people, when they first heard about this stuff, started poo-pooing it. They're like, oh, it's just a lookup. Oh, it's just a stochastic parrot. Oh, it doesn't really do anything, interesting. But that's pretty much wrong. That's not the way it works. So what this generative AI does, which has the backing of kind of neural network technology, is it scans and ingests massive amounts of data, but it doesn't remember that data photographically. What it's doing is it's using mathematical techniques to recognize and store patterns in that data. And when they first started with neural networks, they call them one-layer networks, they would only recognize very, very simple patterns. But now these networks are very, very deep. So they're looking deep into the structure of knowledge and extracting really deep patterns. The kind of patterns that honestly humans might not even recognize. And much like humans, it doesn't record the exact data it finds. It's just storing patterns. And the interesting thing, it's not just storing patterns that it notices in English, it's actually storing patterns in 50 plus languages. So funnily enough, ChatGPT can actually talk fluently in French and German and Spanish and English without the need of any external translation service. And the reason I mentioned this, the concept of it's extracting patterns, this will have relevance when we talk about copyright later on in this presentation. So the generative AI is extracting deep patterns. And one of the things that the OpenAI researchers were quite surprised about is the emergence of various capabilities that they were not expecting at all. So as they started ingesting more and more data, they found that this generative AI started to reason. Like you could give it a logic problem and it would go, well, because of A, then B, and because of B, then C. And it's like, how did it do that? Like nobody programmed it to do that. So what that suggests is some of the deepest patterns that it's recognizing are related to reasoning patterns. So it's important to realize it's not just regurgitating stuff, it's actually able to string together reasoning. And as you all know, we've gone from ChatGPT 3 to 3.5, the ChatGPT-4. There was a new release last week, which apparently is better at reasoning. And ChatGPT-5 is going to be due out later this year, which apparently, according to OpenAI, is going to be even more amazing. So it's always important to know, however dumb you think AI is, this is the dumbest it's ever going to be. It's just going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. But like I say, when it comes to how it works, even the researchers don't fully understand how it works. They've got like a vague idea. So I find that quite interesting. Now, what about hallucinations? Because we hear a lot about those things. So I've worked now and I've engaged in conversation with these AIs now for a full year since they ever came out. And I do more and more and more every day. Like last night, I spent 1 hour talking with ChatGPT-4 about all kinds of subjects. So the way to think about hallucinations is this. AIs really, really, really want to make you happy. That's the key understanding. They really, really want to make you happy. So if you ask it a question, it really wants to give you an answer that you're happy with. And in most cases, it's ingested tons of information. There's no ambiguity, there's no lack of data, and it will draw upon the patterns from that data and give you an accurate answer. And a majority of the times when I ask AI questions, I get really good answers. But if you ask it a question that it doesn't have access to from its data, it will actually tend to make something up rather than just saying, hey, sorry, I can't help you. And that's just because it wants to answer your question. Now that is being addressed, but I'll give you a couple of examples where I've had it hallucinate. So there was a really popular TV program that I watched as a kid called Thunderbirds. And it's kind of this goofy cartoon. It's marionettes with little puppets like, hello, hello, hi brains. And there was one particular episode, a movie of Thunderbirds, that had a really interesting twist at the end. But there's almost no data about this on the internet. I don't know why. So I knew about this thing and I was curious, like, can I catch ChatGPT out? So I said, at the end of the Thunderbirds 5 movie, what was Thunderbird 5? And it got it wrong. And it did, and it got it wrong in the sense that the movie actually tries to mislead the viewers. So the movie, the entire time, tries to mislead the viewers that this spaceship Thunderbird 5 is this very modern thing, but at the end you find out it's an old-fashioned biplane. And ChatGPT got misled in the same way that a human would and gave the wrong answer. So that's one example where it hallucinates. If you ask it for a link to something, that's generally a bad idea, because remember, ChatGPT does not remember where it got stuff. So if you ask it for a link, currently, rather than just saying, sorry, I don't have a link, it feels like it let you down and go, yeah, sure, here's a link. And that link might be a link to nowhere or something. So generally speaking, if you ask it to give you something photographically like a link, that greatly increases the chances of hallucinations. But that can be easily be avoided. And in fact, one of the techniques that we are using to try and ensure that the content from AI is accurate is to use a technique called AI cross-check. So one of the cool things with AIs is there's more than one. So there are great AIs from Anthropic, from Google, from OpenAI, from Facebook. You know, there's more AIs than you can, what is it, shake your fist at, or whatever the phrase is. So why not use one AI to look at the content generated by another AI? So if you want to avoid hallucinations, use one AI and say, hey, we asked this other AI a question. Can you go and verify its content? And if it looks dubious, circle it so a human can intervene. So there are techniques that use other AIs to try and make these AIs more and more accurate. Now, final bullet point on this slide, because this is really just covering generative AI as a topic. Where is it going? So there are a lot of really, really smart people building next generation AIs already. And one of the interesting things is it takes quite a long time to train AI, at least currently, because it has to ingest, 100 gigabyte or something of data from the public corpus of knowledge on the internet in order to kind of fill its brain with patterns. So companies like OpenAI actually built ChatGPT-5 like 3 to 6 months ago, but they haven't finished training it. So they already know what's going to be released, and they've already got a very good sense of it, but it's undergoing this intensive training so that it's ready for prime time. I don't have a special connection with Sam Altman at all, but everything I've heard this guy talking about is that their emphasis is on reasoning and accuracy. So while they're doing very cool things with video generation, their biggest thing is we want to make it smarter and we want to make it more reliable. So that's one thing that's very predictable. These AIs are going to get better. smarter, more accurate, and they're also going to get cheaper. I think that's the other thing that's really important to realize, and that is, if you look at the price of an AI, like what we had to pay CYPHER Learning to access ChatGPT, it's steadily going down in price. Now, the latest, if you want to then do video generation, okay, well, that's back to the previous pricing, but this stuff is going to be everywhere because the price is falling dramatically. So, so hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea about generative AI, where it came from, how it works, where it's going. But for the, later on this conversation, the copyright part, it does not remember things exactly. So now let's go on to the next slide. Prompt engineering. So there are several different ways that you can interact with an AI. And as Michael mentioned, you can do kind of raw AI, and that means popping open some kind of chat window, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and then just conversing with it. And I would say when you're conversing with an AI, by far the best way is to say you're having a conversation with it. So you wouldn't normally do a one-shot thing like, tell me about this, here's the answer, oh, I don't like that answer, okay, I'm done. It's not like Google search. You'll ask it a question, it'll give you something back, and that's the launch pad for your next prompt. So you go, well, I don't quite understand what you said there, or you could disagree with it. Like I disagreed with ChatGPT last night, and I said, I like everything you said except for X, and I disagree with you because of this, and it'll go, hey, that's a good point. Yeah, what about XYZ? So the first thing is, if you're going to use an AI out in the raw, then don't think of it like a search engine. Think of it as something that you talk with backwards and forwards, refine your ideas as you go, and also bear in the back of your mind that if you ask it for a link or a quote or something, that's quite unreliable at this point in time. Now, what about prompts themselves? So there's the raw prompts, and then there are prompts that you can build into computer systems. And most enterprises who are getting serious about AI are trying to figure out how do they introduce AI into the normal flow of work and their software systems. And there is a special way to do prompts when you're going to interface it with a machine. And OpenAI is very aware of this and has great support for it. So for example, I'll take a simple thing. Let's just say that I want it to generate a question bank. And all of us in education know that question banks and quizzes are kind of part of the bread and butter of any kind of course. So let's just say that you wanted to build a question bank, but you wanted to build it efficiently through a bit of software. Because you can sit there and ask it for question banks through ChatGPT, and if it spits out 100 questions, entering them by hand is going to be super tedious. So what you can do when you interface with software is you can ask it a question and say, here is the exact response that I want back. I want it back in this special machine-friendly format, and they use something called JSON. You don't need to know that if you're not a software person. But you say, I want this field to be the question. I want this field to be the correct answer. I want this field to be the number of points. And OpenAI will return a response in that exact machine-friendly format. So like in the case of CYPHER Learning, we've taken everything that we've learned about building nice prompts and captured them in software so we don't have to tediously do them again and again and again. Now, another thing that I've found through trial and error is talking with ChatGPT right now is like talking with a mischievous teenager. It's constantly giving you variations that you might not have expected. So as an example, you might say, hey, this is a true or false question. And sometimes it will respond with the correct answer is no. Sometimes it'll say the correct answer is false. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's making it harder to do to recognize the output. So then I tell it, when you give me the correct answer, give me true or false. It's like, oh, okay. And then it limits itself. So what I found is, in terms of making my prompts more and more useful, is you do it a lot and you start recognizing all the different variations that it does. And then you gradually knock it into shape by giving it additional instructions in the prompt, refining it until it becomes predictable. So when we were building our own AI Copilot, not to be confused with Microsoft Copilot, a lot of that was lots and lots of iteration and prompts until we narrowed it down to exactly what we wanted. But we have also found that as they release new versions of, in this case, ChatGPT, they all answer slightly differently. So what we found, for example, when we upgraded to the last model, that some of the prompts that had worked perfectly, it discovered like a new variation, because I guess it got smarter or more mischievous, depending on how you want to anthropomorphize this. And so we had to go back then and give additional instructions so that it was good again. The other thing that we have discovered is that sometimes it does actually just return you something that's blatantly out of scope. So for example, we'll say, give us this exact format, and when it responds, it doesn't do it in that format. So you can't guarantee, even in give you lots of precision, that it will always follow those instructions. And the technique that we use, which is very effective, is it comes back with an answer, and then we have an assertion, like, let's just check that in that answer, this field is present, this field is present, this is between X, Y, and Z. And if it doesn't match that assertion, then tell it to regenerate. So a lot of the time, it's actually looping in the background when it finds things that aren't quite accurate. Now, with all that said, the good news is you don't have to know any of that stuff to use AI. I mean, my goodness, that would be very tedious if everyone who wanted in the world of education to do something like create a course, that's one of the things I'm going to show you very shortly, had to learn all that stuff. So Michael mentioned a phrase that we coin like packaged AI. So what this means is all of the nasty, dirty work behind the scenes is done by a vendor. So in this case, it's done by CYPHER, but it would be done by Microsoft or Google or whoever. So all those prompts have been refined, captured, packaged up in software behind the scenes. And what you do instead is when you ask the AI to do something, it'll just, let's just say, pop up a form and ask you a few questions. And none of those questions requires any knowledge of AI at all. It's like, do I want this? Yes. Do I want that? No. Click, 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 do it. And then behind the scenes, it's going to go ahead and pull all those prompts for you, assemble all of the output from those prompts, put it together, and give you the final result. So I think that for unstructured discussion, like the discussion I had with ChatGPT last night, that's not packaged. I actually want to have a flowing conversation with ChatGPT. But for repetitive, high-value things that need precision, I think 98% of the use of AI will be packaged in this sense. A few other things I just want to mention is internationalization. Now, this was kind of a shocker to me. So I'm really bad at human languages. I'm good at computer languages, but my French and German, etc., is really awful. So when I was first working with ChatGPT, everything was in English. So I would say, hey, build me a question bank, and the prompt was in English and the result was in English. And I remember thinking, well, our platform, CYPHER platform, supports 50 languages. So I just made the assumption that I was going to have to translate the prompt into Chinese to get Chinese output and translate it into German to get German output. And I was pleasantly surprised to learn that I don't have to do that at all. You can literally in the prompt say, oh, and by the way, give me your answer in German. And that's all you've got to do. And it will just return it in German. And I thought, how does it do that? It obviously can't know German. So maybe what it does, maybe they license Google Translate, and OpenAI's brain thinks in English, and then the final part it sends to Google or something and converts it into German. That was my assumption. And I found out that's not how it works. It literally knows the German language, and it literally knows the Spanish language, and it knows 50 languages. Now, I will say that to different degrees of expertise, like it's probably better at English than any other language, simply because there's more English stuff on the internet than there is, say, Spanish or German. But it's pretty darn good at almost everything. Maybe not as good, but really, really good. So if you were to use Cypher platform and you wanted to build a course in Chinese, it will actually do a really nice job. And how do we know that? Because we've actually got people using our Copilot in 50 languages, and they all seem pretty happy with this output. So that's also just a thing worth noting, is that it does internationalization natively, and it's really good at it. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the really fun part for me, is when you see it in action, because there's one thing just listening to somebody talk about it. It's a whole nother thing to actually see it in action. And I want to underscore, this is not meant to be a sales pitch for Cypher Platform. I'm going to show you it because it does a nice job and it will make my point. But there are probably other systems that, well, actually there probably aren't other systems that can do it as well. But you get the general idea. This is not meant to be a big sales pitch. But I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm going to show you, and then I will show you it in action. So the first thing is, any kind of AI functionality that we're building doesn't just use one AI. There is actually a lot of AIs out there that specialize in different things. So if you want to synthesize voice, there is a great AI called 11 Labs that is really good at doing that. And it can actually synthesize your own voice, which is quite cool. If you want to generate synthetic imagery, then Stability AI is a really good solution for that. If you want to generate text, then OpenAI or Anthropic Claude are both good ways to do that. So a typical packaged AI is going to orchestrate lots of different AIs. It's not just one. So if somebody says to us, hey, which AI are you using? We respond, we're actually using this and this and this and this. The second thing is, you have to be really careful to get high performance. So do you remember what I was telling you about raw ChatGPT? You sit down and you ask it a question and it gives you an answer. Then you ask it a question, then it gives you the answer. Now, if you were to try and do what I'm about to show you in that serial manner, it would take you hours and hours, maybe at least a whole day to create a course, for example. But because we're not doing this manually, we're actually using software to engage with these AIs, you can have multiple conversations going on in parallel. So it's a bit like a whole bunch of people sitting around a table, building a jigsaw puzzle together, and you're all doing these little pieces, and you orchestrate it and bring it together. And at the end, here is your completed puzzle. So what we were able to do, we went from several hours down to 10 minutes, because we took advantage of the fact that this is happening in parallel. The last thing I want to mention is the whole concept of public data versus private data. So when we were building the first version of our Copilot, which was focused on course creation, to keep things simple, we said we're only going to focus on courses that are built using data from the internet. So when you ask the AI a question, it would just answer based on its, I don't know, was like 100 billion connections that it's built from the internet, which is fine if you want to build a course on physics or something non-proprietary. But what happens if you're a business and you are the Nuclear Regulatory Agency and you've got a whole bunch of old PDFs and old Microsoft Word documents that you're not particularly proud of, and you would like to turn them into a beautiful, engaging course? That's obviously something that you really want to be able to do. So the second version of our Copilot focused on private data. And there are some very cool techniques for doing this. So you can give it a PDF, and what it will do, it'll break that PDF into little chunks. And you might have, if you've ever heard of RAG, this is basically the kind of, they call it the RAG approach. So you break it into tiny chunks, and then you use the AIs to read those chunks and tag them with what those chunks talk about. So if you have a huge PDF of, 100 megabyte, break it into tiny little chunks. This chunk talks about heat exchange in a nuclear reactor. This chunk talks about safety procedures. This chunk talks, and you get the general idea. And it stores all of those chunks in a separate database. And then when it starts building the course, it starts pulling together the individual chunks that it needs to create each section as it goes. And you tell the AI, when you're building this particular bit of content, do not use information from the internet. Instead, use this information, which is taken from the chunks. And it does a really good job. So we've got people building courses out of a gigabyte video, out of 200 megabyte PDFs, etc. But there is a caveat. And one of the things that I really like about the fact we've done so much with AI is you learn all these best practices. So for example, if you upload a PDF that's really, really small, it's like a one-page PDF, and then you tell it, oh, build me this 10 module, 30 section course with all the trimmings, you're not really giving the AI enough data to keep you happy. So because it wants to keep you happy, it'll start pulling this information from the internet. But as long as you give it enough private data, then it will do a great job. And we're using AIs that guarantee that they don't share that private data with anyone. So you're not giving away your proprietary information to Microsoft or whatever. It's just yours, and it is able to build great courses out of it. So hopefully that's been a nice little intro. So at this point, I am going to show you this stuff in action. So I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully you guys can all see this dashboard. This is CYPHER platform. And what we're going to do, we're going to look at a course about James Bond. Now, I could have done it on something really dry, like marketing, SEO, digital marketing. But I thought, let's just pick a topic that everyone knows about. And I want to start by taking a look at what makes up a course, and then we'll figure out how can we use an AI to create something similar. So this course is actually quite sophisticated. So obviously it's made out of 10 modules, and every module talks about a separate part of James Bond. But let's start with mastery. So we're really into skills-based teaching and learning. So the general idea is before you actually create this course, you need to decide what skills or competencies is this course going to be teaching. Now, this is a trivial thing. This is what we came up with. Like, if you're going to understand James Bond, here are some of the foundational things: iconography. I can't say that word. Character analysis, James Bond, autistic. These are the kind of things that would make up a nice course on Bond. So ideally, what you do is you start with this, and then you start aligning the overall modules so that they will cover these competencies in detail. So for example, if I go into the introduction to James Bond, this particular module is going to be teaching this specific competency. And ideally, when you look at all the modules together, they will cover all of the competencies that you have listed. Now, within each module, ideally, you'd like some nice graphic. So as you can see, this is the particular graphic for the intro, which is kind of amalgam of all the Bond movies. When you go into the symbols of Bond, there's his Aston Martin DB7. So you want some nice visuals. For the actual sections themselves, some people prefer micro-learning, like bite-sized learning. Some people prefer more full-blown courses. So putting together this course, I decided, hey, let's make it micro-learning.
The birth of Bond.
And if you listen, there's the digital voiceover.
Bond as a cultural icon began with the publication of Cassim Royale in 1953, marking the literary debut of...
So in this particular case, we wanted to show you this is what a really nice micro-learning course looks like. But also you want some form of verification that they've mastered these competencies. So, here's what a typical quiz might look like. So there's a whole bunch of questions there. There's true and false, fill in the blanks, multiple choice. And every single one of these questions is tied back to the specific competency that it's verifying. Now, one of the reasons I mention all of this stuff is that when you look at a course like this, if you're like me, you have the sinking feeling is like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work. So to come up with all the competencies in the first place, and then design the module structure to cover these competencies, and then align every section and every individual quiz question with the competencies. That's the kind of work that nobody enjoys. And in fact, most people don't even do this because it's so much work, they just kind of skip some of these best practices because there's just not enough hours in a day. But in addition, you might also want to gamify a really nice course. So, the idea of gamification is you come up with a fun game, you create levels, rookie agent, license to thrill. That's a nice little twist on words there. Goldfinger's nemesis. These are levels that you might achieve. And then you might set up automation rules. So you're automatically given points and badges as you progress through the course. So the Martini mixer badge, the Aston Martin driver, this all takes a lot of time to put together this sophisticated game. And then last but not least, there is some like icing on the cake, so to speak. Maybe when you get to the end of the game, the end of the course, you might want a glossary of terms. Now, most people don't have the time to put together a glossary, but we put together a glossary to kind of raise the bar in terms of what you might want to see. And you might also want a study guide. So once you've taken the course, if you want a quickly refresher, here is a compressed version of the course that goes through all the main concepts with a single paragraph to cover it. So I thought, this course represents to me a pretty sophisticated, engaging, easy on the eyes, gamified course. And the sixth sense moment in here is that this course did not exist 15 minutes before this webinar started. So this course that I'm showing you was not built by a human. It was actually built by a set of AIs. And it's kind of jaw-dropping. It's like when you look through this course, it's not perfect. I would say it does, let's just say 80% of what you would expect, but it does it incredibly well. So I think about myself, I was basically an L&D guy when I had my corporate business for teaching. And I was a lecturer at UT Dallas when I was in higher ed. And if I was going to build a course, if I could get an AI to build 80% of it for me in 15 minutes, then I can go in and perfect it. So, I was well known for fun anecdotes, really fun projects, little bit of kind of out the box thinking. So I would have just said, build me a course on, in this case, I was teaching Unix and C, and then I would go in and make it mine. So let me show you how easy that is. This is go to the packaged AI. So I'm going to come in and say, build me a course. And it was called, my course was called Unix and C programming. And it took me hundreds of hours to build out the basics. So I'm going to say, I want help from an AI. Bing. So here it comes to packaged AI. This is the topic. And you can pick the persona. Like if I want the course to be a bit more philosophical, I could. If I want it to be thoughtful, I can. I hope you can see this in the Zoom, by the way. I'm assuming you can. For the level, I might want to make it an intermediate course, not advanced course. I might want to make it more academic oriented than professional. And in my instructions, I can say, mention Dennis Ritchie. So you can give nudges and hints to the AI to guide the course in a certain direction. I'm going to build the tiles using, now I can do anime. That's a really kind of fun, goofy kind of graphic. Micro-learning format is the bite size. Maybe I'm not going to do micro-learning format in this case. If I had customized data to upload, like a PDF, maybe I had a previous version of my course and I just want to upgrade it, I could just drag and drop it in here. In this case, I'm going to build one straight from the internet. For the skills or competencies, you can either ask it, come up with your own set, or you can actually say, use an existing set. There might be an industry standard. Like we have some of the US DOL standards for skills for various jobs. You can select those if you want, or you can upload your own competencies. For the content, I'm going to say, I'll skip the glossary because you've already seen it. I want 3 pages per module, and I just want written assessment with a rubric. So let's just skip the quizzes, and I do want it gamified. So as you notice, this is packaged AI. I just go click, 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 continue. It's telling me it's going to use about 1,100 credits. That works out to about $10. So I'm going to build this entire course that would normally take me hundreds of hours for $10. Create the course, please. Now, while it's doing its thing, I'm going to keep on talking, but I'm going to tell you how it's working, which is quite cool. So the first thing that the AI does is try and figure out what exactly it's going to teach. That's what we call the skills or the competencies. Because if you don't know that, it doesn't really have guidance on how to build the rest of the course. And it will typically take about a minute of deep thought on that one specific aspect. It's basically creating the backbone. Because once it's created the backbone of the course, then at that point, it can add flesh to the backbone, if you like, to build the whole course. So let's just see how it's doing. Hasn't done it yet. I'm going to refresh this page every 20, 30 seconds, and then you'll see it magically comes up with, here are the competencies. Now, while it's doing that, I'm also going to talk a little bit about where AI is going. Because we decided as a company to focus on building courses, but there's a lot more that you can do with Gen AI. So for example, you might want to bring Gen AI directly to your learners. So if there is not a course on what they want to learn, rather than just going to raw ChatGPT, they can enter their question into the platform and have it generate like a mini bite-sized bit of learning that directly addresses their question. Oh, so by the way, it's done the first part. So this is basically what it's going to teach. And I can tell you, I am actually an expert in Unix and C. I wrote a best-selling book actually on this topic. And I will tell you, it did a really good job of coming up with the core stuff that it's going to teach. I've actually on my bookshelf back there, I've got my book called Unix and C Programming, and it follows a very similar set of competencies. So now that it's got that, the next thing that it's chewing on is what's going to be the overall module layout. And I will keep on talking while it's doing that. That's the next kind of backbone kind of function that it's going to do. Now, I'll tell you one of the biggest insights that I had while our team was building Copilot. And that is when an AI can create an entire, let's just say 80% of a course in 10 minutes, it changes the way that you think about course development. So when I used to build courses, I would start with, how is my course going to look? I'd come out with the outline, and then I would essentially commit. Good or bad, I'm going to follow this structure, and then I would spend hundreds of hours building that course. But with AI, this kind of supercharged course builder behind the scenes, you can build 5 different versions of a course, all variations, all with different nudges, all with different parameters, etc., in like an hour. And once you've built 5 versions of the course, then you can review all 5 and see which one speaks to you. So you might find that variation number 3 is the one that you really like. So instead of spending hundreds of hours down a blind alleyway, now you know number 3 is actually really good. I'm going to archive 1, 2, 4, and 5, and then I'm going to build out and refine course number 3. And if you can build an entire course for $10, you'll spend $50 building 5 variations of a course. That's going to save you a huge amount of time. Now, it looks like the AI has come up with the module structure now. And you'll notice it uses the anime style, which I think is quite cool. This is a picture of Dennis Ritchie, by the way. And remember when I created the course, I said, mention Dennis Ritchie. And here's an example of my nudge affecting the way that it built the course. Now, at this point in time, it's going to start going into parallel mode. So as you can see, for every module, there are no sections. So what it's doing now, it's figuring out what are going to be the sections that I'm going to have in each individual course, and all those zeros will turn into 3. Because when I use the package, I said, give me 3 at a time. And then it's going to go crazy. It's going to have 30 to 40 parallel conversations building out all the content of these courses. And by the way, I apologize. The leaf blower guy just happened to decide to clean the driveway at the exact time I'm giving a webinar, but hopefully it's not too intrusive. So it's doing its thing. I don't know whether it's going to do this thing in 3 or 4 minutes. So if it doesn't complete this task, I'm going to show you a couple of pre-built courses to show you what an alternative full-blown course looks like. But hopefully you're getting the general idea, like it does a remarkably good job in a small amount of time building out a course. Now it's still at 0 and I'm running out of time. So I'm going to show you another one that I built. Star Trek Next Generation was another fun one. In this case, I picked cinematic. And the big difference with this course is I asked it to give me a full-blown course, not micro-learning. So you'll see here, here's a typical kind of bit of content. It's automatically pulling in recommended images from the internet. It reminds you this may be subject to copyright. And if you don't like a particular image, I can just go, hey, I'm going to replace this with this image instead, or this image, or this image. So it doesn't just give you, one option. It actually gives you like 10 options, and you can just pick and choose the option that you want. Or if I go back to the next one, it's got a funny little image there about being a Starfleet officer. And I want to find one where it inserted a video. So here are some more. So here's one. So this is a video that's relevant to this, that it found from YouTube. And as long as you embed it in the YouTube player, you're fine with copyright. So you don't have to worry about copyright issues in this case. So this is an example of a long format course. You saw the short format course with voiceover, and expect to see things like synthetic video generation coming out very soon as well. So hopefully I've given you a little idea of this stuff can be packaged up in a way that's really easy to use. You can take advantage of it immediately. You don't have to know anything about prompts in order to build courses. And I know that course builders are all overworked. They are not giving sufficient budget. So the main takeaway, I think, from this section is AIs such as CYPHER Learning Copilot are available today, and they can save you countless hours so that you can go in, refine it, make it yours, and be a hero. So I know we've got a few minutes left over, so I will go here and take a look at some of the chat stuff. And
we're going to announce our
particular questions.
And we're going to announce the raffle winner so that we can wrap up at 2. And as I promised to everyone that stayed with us on this, extremely insightful, wasn't it? I saw the woes and the wows and the amazings, and it is truly an incredible tool. So thanks, Graham, for taking us through that. And I was on the edge of my seat. I've heard this before, but I always learned something new when I listened to you go through it again. And I'm still amazed at how you're able to build those with such a short amount of time. And for all of us in the audience thinking that would take us hours. And our raffle winner is?
Yes, thank you, Michael and Graham. So before we wrap up today's workshop, I would like to announce the lucky winner of our raffle. Congratulations to Stephanie Taylor on winning today's prize, a $100 Amazon gift card. We will send you an e-card shortly to celebrate your win.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Graham, pleasure. I can promise you that you'll be getting a lot of feedback from folks, I'm sure on LinkedIn and other platforms as well, about how exciting your technology is. And I think this is the power of what we can hope to achieve. And again, if you'd like to learn anything more about either CYPHER Learning or what their capabilities are, please reach out to us or to CYPHER Learning. And you'll be receiving a PDF of the presentation and a link to the recording in the next 24 hours. So thanks, everyone, for your time today. And have a good
thank you so much,
afternoon
everyone.
and evening.
And thanks for
Bye-bye.
being a host, Michael. Bye.